am ready to shine. Don't worry, I am here.
Give me and my supported ally tough this round. Copy the last spell you cast on only me this round onto that ally. Ooh.
Honor the mountain.
Dude, that's a little crazy.
Dazzling.
Grant? Right, it's Grant. Guys, it's literally Wait, is it Grant? Wait, why'd you guys say Grant? Oh, you mean this one? Yeah. Sorry. Guys, look, listen, it's really early. I just woke up like 5 minutes ago.
Dazzling.
The power creep. Yeah, exactly. It's literally standalone.
You're Taric, the protector.
Climb well, and good luck on your journey. To preserve beauty and protect all life.
My supported ally and I can't take damage or die this round. Copy the last spell you cast on only me this round onto that ally? What?
The mountain endures.
Okay. That's a little crazy.
I am with you always. Victory is a thing of beauty.
Bro. Okay, that's pretty sweet. So it's just Taric. Do we have a bundle of other cards? Give me and my supported ally tough this round. It's 4 mana 2/4. Copy the last spell you cast on only me this round. Target a support ally 7 times. 7 times. I've seen you? Man, if this wasn't an I've seen you, if this was just like you've targeted a supported ally 7 times, I've seen is like really hard to level. Man, that is gonna be crazy. This changes everything. This absolutely can make the mountain peak thing a lot better. Like, because now suddenly you're wanting to build an entire deck around targeting and supporting allies. So this is absolutely huge. This is absolutely huge. The ability for just like the ability for this archetype to just be, you know, based entirely on targeting and supporting, and for a deck to be built around that is definitely going to be how you're going to want to do it. Okay, and this is the full bundle of cards. Let me go ahead and... oh, perfect. We're just going to go right inside of Taric. We've got Gift Giver. A 1 mana 1/2. When I'm summoned, create a gem in hand. Whew. I don't know what that is. Gem. Heal an ally 1 and grant it 1 attack. Can't be cast in combat or response to a spell. What? Okay, hang on. Can't be cast in combat or response to a spell. So, I mean, it's like slow burst speed. Yeah. Then why is it burst? Well, it doesn't pass priority back to the opponent. It doesn't cost an action. And if the text is accurate, you can still use it as a response to skills. So, like, for example, if the opponent were to play Devourer of the Depths, that's a skill, not a spell. And you can push your ally's health out of range of Devourer, right? Apparently, if this text is to be trusted. It is not, didn't fit. That I was really thinking might be the case. Okay, so we have Riot confirmation that it is actually in response to spell or skill. That would make a lot more sense, honestly. So you can't use this as a response to a skill either. It's basically not burst speed. It's just slow speed that steals priority back, right? So we're evaluating Gift Giver, the 1 mana 1/2 that summons this gem. And it is a grant. You get the permanent +1 attack. I mean, at the end of the day, the reason you're running this is to just have a target, right? It's like, you're just running this with Taric decks, and with the big mountain giants on top decks, which I'm gonna have to reevaluate my score on big mountain giant peak of the something of the peak, because there's an insane amount of support for this all of a sudden, right? An insane amount of support. Suddenly you're building your entire deck around like spam targets. Arbiter of the Peak, yeah, Arbiter of the Peak. You're building your entire deck, like the entire Taric archetype, around spam targeting units for a win condition, and it's got a lot of support. Gift Giver is an absolute auto include in that archetype. Like, if you're running either Taric or Arbiter of the Peak, you need to be running 3 Gift Giver, period. I think. Because it is just like a very, very cheap, proactive way of getting a target. We'll see how many other targets that they're gonna add, but considering like how much synergy these things have with this is absolutely what you're gonna want. Next, we've got Mountain Goat, which is also the ability to create a gem, although this one requires you to strike, which is a little awkward, right? Because especially with its 1 health, it very easily has the ability to just die without creating that gem. I would say, for the most part, Mountain Goat is probably going to be a lot less competitive. Cards that require you to strike are often going to have a really, really hard time being useful, because their ceiling is a lot higher. They can trigger multiple times, but it's very, very easy for them to trigger only once. And here's the problem. When they have 1 HP, it is... Or sorry, no. It's not just that they'll trigger more than exactly once, but it's very easy for them to trigger 0 times. And especially when they have 1 HP, it's really easy for them to die. Like, this will die to like a Make It Rain, a Static Shock, a Mystic Shot. It'll die to a lot of things. And if you're wanting to run a gem, you'd really rather be running Gift Giver. Now, it is possible that there will be some support. Like, we can imagine some cards that can do such a good job of protecting something early on that we could definitely imagine using Mountain Goat, but it's overall a little bit on the weaker end. Mentor of the Stones. Grant my supported ally +2/+2. Last breath, create 3 gems in hands. Whoa! That's crazy. What? Okay, dude, Arbiter of the Peak is like nuts. Arbiter of the Peak has to be good. There's so many targets. You just like spam target gems on your own stuff, right? Like, you have to be able to get really cheap Arbiter of the Peaks by like turn 6. They're adding so much support to Arbiter. Like, I expected them to add some support, but a card that gives you like 3 targets for free, like in a very reliable way on turn 3, that's insane. Right? Gems still cost 1. Yeah, gems still cost 1. It is pretty expensive, but especially with how Taric works. So Taric requires you to, like, I've seen the targets happening, and the gems are really, really good for that, because you can save the gems until Taric is on the board, right? You can also run Cloud Drinker. Yeah, Cloud Drinker is funny to imagine here. I don't have much faith in Cloud Drinker, but we are seeing a lot of burst spells. We do know that Spell Shield is, Bastion, which is, I believe... Oh, it's not Taric's spell. Taric has Taric's Blessing of Targon, I guess. Okay, so it's confirmation, I guess, that Bastion is not Taric's spell. But there's a lot of burst things we've seen so far, including Bastion. So we'll talk about that afterwards. Okay, we've got Blessing of Targon, which is just like 5 mana, +3/+3 permanent. So it's basically like a +2 mana standalone. This one feels a little overpriced. It's really important not to get like baited into the Grant mentality. I think in a lot of cases, Grant is gonna be overcosted, right? It's the idea of like a permanent buff, the idea of this permanent value. When we see the word Grant, we're like, oh my god, it's crazy, it's a Grant. It gives it permanently, right? And the thing is, it's like, it's often going to be fairly overcosted. In Runeterra, especially as you get into more competitive levels, usually you just want stuff that's going to be swinging for like immediate value and help you secure control over the game. And then once that happens, you don't really need the permanent buff anymore, right? So it's like, when you compare this to something like Fury of the North, paying 1 more mana for that, like, 2 less stats is a really, 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 really big deal. So even if, like, we can imagine, like, 2 turns later, it might still be there, it's often not going to be quite enough, right? It's hard to evaluate just because, of course, you know, Taric, the whole point of Taric is it doubles up the spell, right? So I will say this is a good champ card. When you double draw Taric, the fact that your second Taric is able to, you know, synergize with your first one by being Taric's Blessing of Targon is really great, and that's good. Would you want to main deck this? I think it's likely that you'd probably have better options. Like, whatever second color you're in, or whatever Targon cards we haven't seen yet, it's likely that there's gonna be some better buffs that you'd want to do, right? It's a token, you can't main deck it. It doesn't have a gem. Why would I mean, it's true that it doesn't have a gem, but it's also very bizarre that they would print a champion card that doesn't have a main deckable counterpart. I would guess it seems more likely that it's just a visual bug that it doesn't have a gem. Maybe we can get developer confirmation of that, but it's it would be weird to me if this wasn't a main deckable card. Would Brothers Bond be 2 towards Taric's level up? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Like, you can level up Taric really aggressively with cards that double target like that for cheap. Transfusion as well. Transfusion would also be a double target. The problem with double targets is Taric's ability, copy the last spell you cast on only me this round, Taric's ability doesn't work with that double target stuff. I assume, and I'm really not sure, but I assume if you transfusion, it will not count it as being cast only on Taric because it double targets, even though it only buffs one of them. Blessing of Targon is main deckable. Champion spells don't have gems. Gems are not. Okay. So, Blessing of Targon is main deckable. We have developer confirmation there. And lastly, we've got Shards of the Mountain. Fill your hand with gems. This one kind of has to be trolly. It's like, the Mentor is kind of crazy. The Gift Giver looks pretty good. The Mountain Goat is probably idealistic. There's no way that this one isn't trolly. It's like, it doesn't have a body. It doesn't have a potential for upside. The thing about Mentor of the Stones is, like, yeah, there will be plenty of cases where it dies right away, but that's fine, right? That's totally cool. Like, we really have to evaluate trades, you know? Like, look at how these trades happen. Because that's the most important part of, like, thinking whether these cards are good or not. It's like, I play a Mountain Goat, and the opponent Mystic Shots it. Is that a good trade for me? It depends on how the rest of my deck is built and how vulnerable my deck is to Mystic Shot. If I'm giving them unique value to their Mystic Shot, if my hand isn't really vulnerable to Mystic Shot, then that's a bad trade for me. If my hand is vulnerable to Mystic Shot, and I don't mind slowing down the pace of the game, then that's actually a good trade for me, right? Mystic Shot doesn't have to win an even exchange. When you look at Mentor of the Stones, suddenly it's like, yeah, if it survives, then I get a free grant on the support. That's crazy. If it dies right away, look at this, Mentor of the Stones. If this dies right away, let's say they Mystic Shot it. I just traded up +1 mana to have 3 gems. That's totally fine. That's an absolutely fine exchange. If they, like, make it rain it or Vile Feast it, it's a bit worse, but it's still, like, within very, very acceptable ranges, right? So this card, Mentor of the Stones, is just kind of always good. This card is looking a little crazy, actually. Whereas, like, Shards of the Mountain, yeah, you can get more than 3 gems, but it's like, it doesn't have that body, it doesn't have that threat, it doesn't have the ability to grant, it costs more mana, and how many gems are you really gonna need? Like, there's gonna be so many cases where you don't really need more than 3 gems, right? You can get 10 gems. Yeah, but gems are gonna have, like, really significant diminishing returns. Gems, as far as we know, have 2 main functions, and they might have, like, some functions in the future, but the main 2 reasons for them are to level up your Targon or to discount your Arbiter. And to that end, you really only need a few gems. You're never really gonna need more than, like... You're never gonna need more than, like, 3 or 4, maybe 5. Like, in in common situations, outside of like the super fringe situations, right? It's good discard fodder. It is good discard fodder, but you're never gonna need to discard that many cards unless there's like major things we haven't seen yet. So Shards of the Mountain feels very hard to use compared to the others. I'm very happy giving Shards of the Mountain a good old Darius emote. Which brings me to the new rating system. For the sake of clarity, we spent yesterday on stream planning out a more efficient rating system. Instead of using numbers, we've evolved to symbols, like the ancient Egyptians. Okay? So, the system is defined as this. Lux emote indicates a meta-defining nuts card. Okay? Swoon indicates a great option in many decks. Vlad is a solid option in many decks. It's just a pretty good card. This is Fine Yasuo indicates has a chance of being competitive. Average. Okay? Then we've got the Sad Poro emote, which is bad and constructed, solid in expeditions or budget decks. Heimerdinger emote is an experimental card, could rarely find a home, but a niche consideration. Basically something that really does have a chance, but it's gonna need to fit into the exact right thing to be good, right? Darius emote represents being absolutely garbage, and Queen emote is an optional, meta-dependent tech, alright? So, this is entirely intuitive. I'm already lost. Guys, you don't have to remember this, because the emote conveys the exact sentiment that you're looking for in every known situation. Okay? So, we're just gonna start off, okay? Let's start off quite easily. This is Taric. So, just to reflect, and this is gonna be my first evaluation, right? We're gonna come back later. I'm gonna be sort of like updating things as I go, right? I'm gonna be doing my kind of podcast review, getting a lot of different people on here, just like on calls and talking and thinking about different ways to use these and build these. But this is how we're gonna start, okay? And Taric's a really interesting one. Milking time? Yeah, it's milking time, boys. What are we gonna do with you, Taric? You seem like you could be really good. I'm a really big fan of the 4 health stat line. It's got some, like, in terms of stats, it's got some real Maokai, you know, vibes, because it's like 4 mana, 2/4, 4 mana, 1/4. It's very much the same. Like, it dies to the same things, it gets punished by the same things. You have the ability to be like super high synergy. Ultimately, Taric's gonna be effectively impossible to evaluate in a vacuum. I think I like the idea of the archetype. It's a little bit hard for like attack based, like low spell interaction archetypes to be super nuts. I will say though, Arbiter of the Peak, I think, might carry the Taric archetype. I think Arbiter of the Peak is probably a bigger payoff than Taric himself. Like, Taric's a little bit dependent on a lot of things to go. Like, he needs to be able to take free attacks, and he needs protection. And you need, like, spells that are actually going to be able to be played. He does have the pretty powerful redoubling effect, though. Especially if we want to use it on something like something that can take a buff very well, like an elusive. And we already know this archetype has things that can take buffs very well, because Arbiter of the Peak is Overwhelm, right? So we already know that we can get like that free support. This could be a little crazy. I would say the biggest caution in my mind is probably people are gonna like overdevelop for this archetype at first. People are gonna be running like trolly stuff like Shards of the Mountain. I think Taric's gonna be pretty alright. I would be very happy rating Taric a solid Vlad out of 10, okay? Taric, to me, is just like the perfect embodiment of what it means to be a Vlad emote. It's just pretty good, not gonna be absolutely amazing, but a solid archetype that I think will be able to kind of like get things done. In terms of like raw power level, what I'm envisioning is something along the lines of deep, right? I'm not talking about like play pattern or anything like that, but on a power level, sort of like that sort of thing where it's like high synergy. It's pretty decent. It exists on the competitive level. It's not great, but it actually has some real potential. But again, I'm gonna be discussing this with you guys and people that I invite on calls all day, and I might be wrong. We'll have to like come back to that. These are just my initial impressions. Then we've got Gift Giver. Gift Giver is pretty solid. Being able to create a gem in hand is nice. God, honestly, given Mentor of the Stones, I don't actually know if you want Gift Giver anymore. When I was looking at Gift Giver before, I was like evaluating it in a world where Mentor of the Stones doesn't exist. Here's the big thing about Mentor of the Stones, which is that it gets you gems that you might not have needed gems otherwise, but also because of its timing, it comes out at 3 mana and it gives you a bunch of gems. Because of that, well, if it dies, which it might not die, but because of that, banking spell mana is going to be pretty good for this archetype, right? Which is fine. I would say Gift Giver is probably a little bit weaker there, and I would be very happy rating Gift Giver a this is fine out of 10. Okay, then we've got Mountain Goat. Mountain Goat is definitely a sad Poro if I've ever seen one. Mountain Goat is I would say, because a lot of you guys are conveying the sentiment that you would like for this, you would like to understand the system a little bit better. And Mountain Goat is just like, when I'm thinking sad Poro emote, Mountain Goat is kind of what comes to my mind. It's a card that, it's not like the worst card in the history of existence. It does have a bit of a chance of seeing play. But overall, Mountain Goat just doesn't really scream to me to be like competitively viable or close to it. There's a bit of a fundamental flaw with a card like this, which is like, even if you add more support to it, it's always going to be too disruptible, right? And because of that, it's going to get a sad Poro instead of something like a Heimerdinger, which would be better applied. Heimerdinger would make a lot more sense if it had more hope of seeing play one day. And speaking of which, let's actually go to Shards of the Mountain. I think I would rate Shards of the Mountain a perfect Heimerdinger emote. And the reason for that is simple. It's almost certainly a bad card, but it has a really unique effect that might have the ability to make sense when matched with a certain thing. And this is like this is really the embodiment of what it means to be a Heimerdinger emote, right? And that is basically, it just has a chance of making sense in like some kind of experimental thing. It's almost certainly not going to be good, but we can dream of it. We can experiment with it. We can concoct certain things that make it good, right? And especially one day, there will eventually be, maybe a long time from now, there will eventually be some kind of card that discards your entire hand for per card payoff, or some kind of engine that is able to give you per card payoff to your hand, right? Something that that has the ability to do that, right? We can imagine that coming through in a lot of different ways. It's not here yet, but I can't outright give Shards of the Mountain a Darius emote, right? Because it at least has a very unique effect, right? And it does have a lot of synergy points. Okay, then we get to Mentor of the Stones. Mentor of the Stones. Wow, what a nuts card. What an absolutely insane card. So I will say, one thing about Mentor of the Stones that's really important. The opponent will probably, in many cases, very much avoid killing your Mentor of the Stones, right? It's sort of like a Cursed Keeper, where sometimes you will really want your Mentor of the Stones to die. Now, this might surprise a little bit, right? Because you might be like, well, why would you want your Mentor of the Stones to die? The thing about Mentor of the Stones is, like, if you can get it to die during combat, that's amazing. If you can get it to die on the offense on combat, that's insane. Because you got the support you wanted. You weren't going to get another support for another 2 turns. Another 2 full turns. That's so long. And you get the 3 gems that you wanted. So, not necessarily something you want to have happen on like turn 3, but maybe like turn 5 you just want to pop it for gems, right? Because you really don't want this grant to get off more than twice. At that point, you'd really rather have the gems in almost any game, right? So this card is somewhat balanced around that. because sometimes your opponent might be fine letting it live. It really does feel like Grizzled Ranger. It's very, very similar to Grizzled Ranger, where it's like, it puts out a real threat that they literally have to deal with a scary last breath. Right? Like a really, really, really scary last breath. This really strong for elusives. Yeah, sure. Mentor of the Stones, you could just slap in elusives. It gives them a buff, and if it dies, then you get 3 attack that you can just apply to the elusives. You could definitely combine this in a lot of different ways. Mentor of the Stones is, I think kind of nuts. I think Mentor of the Stones is actually a little insane. Like, it feels like a really... It is a bit dependent on the synergy making sense. And I don't think it's going to be an amazing card outside of the synergy. And because of that, I will say, I can't give it a Lux emote. I can't give it, like, you know, the premium emote, because it really just does fit like this one archetype, but it's going to hard carry this archetype so hard. It's going to hard carry this archetype so hard, Mentor of the Stones. 3 of auto include. I will happily give this a swoon emote for Mentor of the Stones. This is kind of like just a pretty great card. You're going to absolutely jam it into every, like, Taric or Arbiter deck. We're going to need, like, a name for this archetype, because we can't just call it a Taric deck, because a lot of them might run Arbiter and not Taric, right? It's like a support self-target archetype. Okay, and that's it. Did we do Blessing of Targon? Did I give it a score? I think I gave that a score at the start, didn't I? Gem deck? Yeah, I guess you can call it a gem deck. Sure, gem deck. That makes sense. I think overall, it's a lot easier evaluating like individual cards than archetypes, because it's going to be kind of like hard to say how good this archetype is. It's going to be hard to see like what other supports they add. But this actually strikes me as pretty solid. I think the biggest thing that this archetype lacks right now is a finisher, and I think Arbiter of the Peak gives it that finisher in a really, really big way. So in addition to rating these cards, I'm going to make 2 comments. Arbiter of the Peak, suddenly, because of like these new cards, Arbiter of the Peak is absolutely a swoon, at least. I could see a reality where it's like, it becomes a Lux, but I'm going to give Arbiter of the Peak a swoon. Arbiter of the Peak is a card that will carry this archetype. It literally is better than Taric. And I know some of you guys are saying, well, Swim, this is why it's kind of silly to evaluate cards before we've seen the entire archetype. And you're right. It is kind of silly to do that, but it's still better to like actually talk about it than to like, because the thing is, it's really lame for me to just say the words, well, this card looks like it might be good and it might be bad, but let's wait to see what the other cards are gonna be before we evaluate it. Because I would just say that with everything, and that's not fun for anyone. That's kind of like a cop-out, right? I mean, yeah, it's very true that, like, archetypal cards like that, you know, are gonna be changing depending on what else we see. But we got so much more support than I could have imagined. Like, they were obviously going to add some self-targets and some supports. Look at, like, Mentor of the Stones, man. Like, anyone who might have even thought Arbiter was gonna get more support yesterday, could we have imagined they would give it something like Mentor of the Stones that has a support that they need to kill, and that has a last breath that gives you 3 targets on top of that? That's absolutely ridiculous for Arbiter. That's so crazy for Arbiter. Like, the most insane thing we could have possibly imagined. So, I have to floor both Mentor and Arbiter at swoon emotes. Okay? The last point I'm going to make is some of you guys are very excited about the idea of Cloud Drinker. Cloud Drinker is really, really adorable. Really, you should be thinking of Cloud Drinker as a card that sort of is able to discount itself, right? So think about it like this, where Cloud Drinker, imagine it's a conditional 0 mana card. Imagine that Cloud Drinker says, if you play 6 burst cards, I retroactively cost 0 mana. That's really, really bad. Like, that's really awful. So even if you play 6 gems, all you're getting is a 0 mana 3/5, which isn't even good. That's not even good. A 0 mana 3/5 on turn 6 isn't even good. And all you're getting, and that's 6 gems, which is kind of on the high end. And you can say, well, Swim, if I play like 10 gems, then I'm getting 4 mana back. I don't know, man. That's a really, really, really big scam, dude. You're getting absolutely upsold. Absolutely upsold, man. If you're paying intent to get 4 back, it's just not gonna be worth it here. People are saying Jay Medarda. Yeah, Jay Medarda is gonna be really, really adorable with this combo as well. I suspect that there's not gonna be enough of a reason to be in PNZ, but we can definitely imagine running Jay Medarda in this deck. It has a much higher chance of making sense than Cloud Drinker. Absolutely. Much higher chance. Okay. And that's it. That's the kind of like initial impressions evaluation. So for the YouTube video, I'll be updating my pinned comment that will, you know, if I change my mind about any of these ratings, I will keep it updated for moving forward. All right?